All right, time to get Billsy here. Now, I watched the Joe Brady press conference as being introduced as the new Bills head coach, so you didn't have to. And I wrote some notes I was going to share with you guys. There's actually quite a few tidbits in here, but also some interesting news that I'll have in the next video about potential defensive coordinator options for the Bills. Obviously, we've mentioned Jim Leonard and Jim Schwartz. So we'll have a little news on both of those guys in the next video. But as for now, one key thing, Josh Allen was in a walking boot with crutches today. If you weren't aware, he had a foot injury going back to the middle of the season that he had been battling. He had surgery recently to fix that. They didn't really say exactly what it was, but he was, and they didn't talk about it at the press conference, but some videos and pictures were going around showing Josh. Looks like it'd be one of those things like, within a few weeks to a month, he'd be up and about. But still interesting nonetheless to see Superman in a walking boot with crutches. So, as for Joe Brady, I thought the press conference was great. I thought Brandon Beane did a great job. Joe Brady was great. He was obviously, I don't know if nervous is the word, anxious maybe is a better one, excited. Some people felt like he was overly talkative. I didn't think so. It appears to be just how he is, just kind of a fired up guy who's willing to just spill his guts out there. I didn't think he talked too much or anything of that nature. But a few things that came up quite often during his speech, and then when he did a Q&A with the press along with Brandon Beane as well, was communication and alignment. Those two words were said numerous times by both Brady and Beane, but Brady in particular. I mean, that was huge throughout. He was also quick to point out that alignment doesn't necessarily mean agreeing on everything. Essentially, he doesn't want a bunch of yes men, but when a decision's made, they want to go forward. And I don't know if that necessarily has anything to do with some split between McDermott and Bill's brass or what. We're going to kind of move on from that, I guess. But ultimately, it was just, hey, we're not agreeing on everything, but we're going to be aligned. And that when we make a decision, we're going forth and we're going to be confident as it goes. Brady was very, very genuine in his thinking of Sean McDermott and how he loves Sean McDermott, and that he also understands that McDermott has built something very special in Buffalo from a culture standpoint, from a success standpoint, but he wanted to bring a new energy, a new mentality, a new vision. And he mentioned that while he's thankful for Sean McDermott and all the coaches that he's been under, Sean Payton, Matt Rule, excuse me, he wanted to build upon the foundation laid, but go forward. And I thought that was great. And he mentioned kind of in vague terms a new energy, a new mentality, a new vision. But he did keep saying mentality over and over and over again, and how he wanted to have whoever the Bills play, whoever they're playing, that opposition is nameless, they're faceless. They have to play the Bills first and foremost. It's not, hey, we're playing the Dolphins, or hey, we're playing the Chiefs. He didn't give these examples. I'm paraphrasing here, but hey, we're playing the Chiefs, and then of course think about the baggage that would come with that, right? Or we're playing the Bengals. No, every game is they're a nameless opponent, they're a faceless opponent, and they have to play us, the Buffalo Bills, and Josh Allen. He did mention Josh Allen in that. No matter the weather, the opponent, whether it's indoors, outdoors, whatever it might be, for him it was about they have to play us first and foremost, rather than us having to play the opposition and letting them dictate things. We're going to dictate things. And one of the first things he mentioned that got me really fired up, I actually yelled, "Let's go!" really loud, was when he had mentioned that his defense is going to be attack-oriented and aggressive and versatile. And again, I don't mean to bring it back to McDermott, but the reality was that was not McDermott's defense. McDermott's defense was not physical. It was not attack oriented. It was very much soft coverage, conservative, almost playing scared at times. And he mentioned that he wants to dictate things as the defensive coordinator for the opposition. Make that OC on the other sideline and that quarterback be tripping out in the midst of the play call, in the midst of going to the line of scrimmage, in the midst of the play, and even post play. They want to always making those guys sweat. and not be able to sleep at night knowing they're going to be playing this really tough Bills defense. Some other words that he used that I really liked from a defensive side, he mentioned, where'd it go? Flexibility and versatility on defense. And I don't think we saw a lot of that in the previous regime. So I like that. And that kind of also lends itself to what is being kicked around. It sounds like they're going to go to a 3-4 defense, an odd man front, which, of course, like I mentioned in my previous video, will go at times into a 5-2, which is very exciting. He also mentioned that a big thing for him is communication, connection between the players, accountability between players, coaches, and vice versa, and love, and how quiet teams don't win. He wants to bring that energy and that communication constantly. And he mentioned love numerous times, and I know it's a big thing if you pay attention to what Josh Allen, he tells all the guys all the time, I love you, I love you, I love you, when he gives them, taps on the helmet or a quick hug, pre and post game, that kind of stuff. And Joe Brady really leaned into that and said, love, if you love the man next to you and you care about his success more than your own, that's how you win. And I thought that was great. And he also, Coach Brady was very adamant. He understands that the expectations are high, and he's not shying away from it. And that, yes, they didn't reach the ultimate goal, that from Pagula on down once, but he's not running away from it. And I like this quote. It said, no one rises to low expectations. And so he's going to take that head on. And I know at press conferences, coaches are going to say all the right things and that kind of thing. But I really thought this came off well. Certainly a lot better than the press conference we saw last week. As for Brandon Beane, I thought he did a great job. Pagula didn't come up at all, meaning he wasn't on stage. He didn't introduce Joe or anything like that. Probably better that way, given how things went last week, and he kind of took the brunt of the negativity of that press conference. But when Beane was asked, when did you know that Joe was the guy? Beane mentioned, hey, we interviewed 9 guys. We had it essentially pared down to the last 2 or 3 finalists. And I'm paraphrasing there. He didn't say that specifically, but it was kind of talked about in a roundabout way. And he said during that time, Joe was standing out. Now, Joe Brady, for those who don't know, was the first candidate interviewed. I think it was the day after, or maybe in the day of, that it was announced that Sean McDermott was fired. So, he had to sweat this one out for 8 or 9 days in between having that interview and the announcement coming out. But Beane kept saying he was standing out. They only did, rather than maybe an hour, hour and a half Zoom call with guys, they were making it long, much longer, more intense. It's where they didn't really feel like they needed a second interview for guys because if you're not aware, they didn't do second interviews with anybody, and they caught a little flack on that. But it's like, hey, if you've spent 3 hours with somebody or 4 hours, what do you need a second one for, right? But they did say they ended up doing a second Zoom call with Joe Brady after they kind of realized we think he's the guy, or at least one of the final 2 finalists, but he was standing out. That they had another talk with Joe Brady via Zoom, and he's being said halfway through that he realized, hey, this is the guy. He checks the boxes, and while he doesn't check all of the boxes, admittedly, he checked a lot of them and the important ones that they really wanted. Now, I want to touch on this because I thought this was really important. There were so many people online. God, online can be just goofy sometimes. That were giving the Bills a lot of flack for interviewing Philip Rivers and attempting to interview Mike McDaniel and things like that. Why are they interviewing Lou Anamuruo, right? Why do that? Well, Beane admitted, hey, we got a lot of information about how other teams do things, how these potential coaches are going to do things when at some point, essentially, if they become a head coach, what would they do? And he said he learned more than he expected by far. And that's why you do those interviews. So Bills fans freaking out about these poor interviews and make it more about quality interviews rather than quantity. As I mentioned previously, there's not a maximum amount of interviews they could do. They could do 100, they could do 3, whatever it is. And obviously they took copious amounts of notes. They're going to take some of those things and implement it as they move forward. And that's a great thing to do, especially for a team like the Bills who generally don't go out of house for guys. Not since Bean and McDermott were brought on. A lot of their scouts and player personnel guys are guys that they've brought with them from elsewhere, have worked with before. Same with players, right? So to go outside the building, interview all these guys, and get some intel from how other teams do it is a beautiful thing. It's something we should be happy about. Not to mention, it's not like this interview process was overly long. I mean, you have teams like the Browns and Raiders who are still in it, or excuse me, not the Browns, but the Raiders and Cardinals who are still in the interview process and started well before the Bills. So, everyone relax. There's always things to be learned. They kept bringing up terms like energy, mentality, and vision, but didn't really get into deep into specifics of what that means. Again, more focus on mentality, connection, and love. But the thing I really liked, he said, attack-oriented defense that makes opposing play caller stress and lose sleep, and the best defenses put pressure on the play caller and the QB pre and post snap. And to me, it sounds like he's seeking a very versatile defense that where they can make a lot of disguises, which is a definite change from McDermott, as I mentioned earlier. And going back to when the Bills and Bengals played, I remember, and this was in a regular season game, maybe 2 years ago. Uh, I think it was T. Higgins had mentioned that they knew everything the Bills were doing defensively pre-snap because everything they were doing was just what they had seen on film, and they weren't changing anything. And I had also heard that, and from Chiefs press conferences as well. So it's good to see that we're going to be looking at more disguises, more versatility, to where it's not so easy for opposing offenses to figure out what the Bills D is attempting to do. Brandon Bean, I thought this was interesting to mention that whether it was all the candidates, but specifically when it came to Joe Brady and Brian Daboll, that they looked at those two guys as if they had never worked with them and that they were brand new, blank canvas candidates that tell me from the beginnings. Let's start from scratch. And they seem to be very genuine in that thought process. I know it's easy to say that, but not actually do it. But it seemed like they're very genuine in that, and that gave Joe Brady the opportunity to really dig into himself from the beginning, rather than just assuming since they have this base knowledge on him that just fill in some holes. It was like, hey, start from scratch, and we go from there. When it came to potential player changes and personnel changes, they didn't get into specifics, though Bean did mention hey, like let's say theoretically we go into a five-man front. He didn't use that exact term, but that was the idea. He said that they emphasized looking for fast physical players, which I love. What a blessing that is. I'm all a go on that one. I think any of us in Bills Land would agree with that. And Bean also understands that Joe Brady's going to be learning on the job as a head coach. I mean, that's just the reality of it. He's new. While he checked a lot of boxes, one of the big boxes he didn't check was having head coaching experience. I mean, he's never even been head coach at a high school or college. So this will be different, and my hope is that they get some good coordinators to come in there and help shoulder some of that. Maybe potentially one of the coordinators being a guy who has some head coaching experience to help with that, or maybe an assistant head coach with some head coaching experience in the NFL to help shoulder some of that burden from Joe Brady, because he's obviously going to have a lot of pressure and a lot on his plate. Well, that's all I got for now. I got some new information on defensive coordinators coming up, so be on the lookout for that. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comments, and we'll go from there. As always, go Bills.